Hello and welcome to Indigenous Cafe, your Indigenous Cafe. I'm your host, Roman Orona, bringing you music, conversation, and inspiration from the native peoples of North America and the native people from all over the world. Today on Indigenous Cafe, we're traveling with the virtue of honor. And honor is living by the virtues, showing great respect for yourself, other people, and the rules you live by. When you are honorable, you keep your word. You do the right thing regardless of what others are doing. Honor is a path of integrity. Let's begin our journey right here on Indigenous Cafe.
No. Pesha Pesu entaba Jerusalem Kaya la Pesha Pesu entaba Jerusalem Kaya la Kaya Elishe Kaya Elishe Jerusalem Kaya la mi baba Kaya Elishe Kaya Elishe Jerusalem Kaya la mi baba Down the valley up the mountain Jerusalem is my sweet home. Down the valley, up the mountain, Jerusalem, hallelujah, is my sweet home. Home, sweet home, home, sweet home, Jerusalem, hallelujah, is my sweet home. Home, sweet home, home, sweet home, Jerusalem, hallelujah, is my sweet home. Pesha lena, Pesha tabawa, how Jerusalem ababa, Kaya Elishe, Pesha wes tabale, Jerusalem, Kaya baba, Kaya Elishe, Kaya Elishe, Jerusalem baba, how Kaya lami baba, Kaya Elishe, Kaya Elishe. hle hawu Jerusalema
You're listening to Indigenous Cafe. I'm your host, Roman Orona, bringing you on with a amazing educator. He's a public speaker, a journalist, and an amazing flute player. He's an award-winning flute player, traveled all over the world, and has an undergraduate degree from Marquette University. I'd like to welcome from the Lac du Flambeau Ojibwe Indian Reservation in northern Wisconsin, Mr. Darren Thompson.
Well, bonjour, everybody. Thanks for having me on, Roman. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Really like what you have going on with the interviewing that you're highlighting with our artists and our talents. So I'm really excited to be on.
Well, we're excited to have you here today on Indigenous Cafe. And as you know, we're traveling the world with the virtue of honor, and as a advocate for culture and an advocate and a journalist and a flute player, and the so many dimensions of who you are as a person. What is honor? What does honoring mean to you?
Great question. I think honor to me means getting to know a person or people and who they are. So that takes time. And when you get to know a people, you're able to meet them in their space. Now, I don't necessarily mean physical space, but to pay respects to them. And, that, so in other words, it's a lot of relationship building. We can all say that we honor our family. There's many different aspects and layers to honor. Like, I hope and strive to honor my family in my work, and that is to pay respects to them because they were the ones who raised me. And so they were the number one influencers and teachers of who I am as an individual. And furthermore, I aim to honor my tribe and where I come from because, again, those are other aspects of my identity. But essentially, to honor, the action of honoring is one, an action, and two, it is paying that respect and paying that tribute to to a person or a people in the form of an action.
I like that. It's more of a global view, or a more holistic view of honor, as opposed to, being like just I don't want to say self-centered, but more focused on you and your family, right? Like, or your people. It's bigger than that. It sounds like that's what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and I acknowledge that I am a person among peoples, and those peoples can, of course, start with my core of my family, and furthermore, my tribe or my community, and furthermore, indigenous people, and furthermore, our species as human beings.
Right.
So once you get to know me, or once you get to know anyone, you experience those traits about people, and I may seem and sound like I'm super serious, and I can be, but I would say that, I have a sense of humor, and that sense of humor comes from my family, and, I aim to honor them in my abilities to bring laughter. And by no means am I a comedian, that's a totally different, approach to laughter, but nonetheless, like, that's a big part of my identity. And, I choose to, honor my family in a number of ways, and ways I may not even be conscious of.
And that is actually really, really, like, I was just thinking about that as you said it, in ways that you may not be conscious of, and that is like something that I was told as a young kid, and I didn't get it at that point. But it's like, listen, like, as a kid, my grandparents were told me, you don't just represent you as an individual. You never will. You represent you, your family, all of us, your community, and then, bigger than that, even, all Native people. Because, those people that aren't Native or Indigenous, when they know that you're Native or Indigenous, they tie you to everybody else. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and that's a difficult thing to take on. And when you participate in things in the public realm, which many of us do, especially as an artist, right or wrong, and fair and unfair, you do represent, of course, your family, of course, your tribe, and of course, all Native and Indigenous peoples. Because when you are in the public realm, I'm still experiencing this. I've been, performing and doing things in public for 15 years, and I still meet non-Native people who have never met a Native person, and who have never heard a Native person speak English, and so on and so forth. And, although that may seem bizarre, it's a fact. There are many people who still do not have this experience, and, that is something that, like I mentioned earlier, is, fair and unfair, because, there are many imperfections to who I am as a person, and, who we all are as people. But nonetheless, I can try to do my best, and try to, keep that component to everything that I do, and that is honor, to honor where I come from, because if it weren't where I came from, I wouldn't be able to do what it is that I do. And I can only say that for myself.
Right. It makes sense. Makes complete sense. Hey, let's take a quick break and listen to some of your music right here on Indigenous Cafe. Welcome back. You're listening to Indigenous Cafe. We're having a conversation with Darren Thompson. So we're going to switch it up a little bit here. I saw in 2017 you teamed up with a flute maker and created a special signature flute. Tell us a little bit about that. How did that come about?
Sure. So that's a great, feather in my cap as a part of my career. And, that was influenced by other people that I looked up to who played the instrument, like someone like Mary Youngblood, who won a couple Grammys, Bill Miller, who won a Grammy for playing the instrument. And the way that they had branded, or the way that they wanted to share a part of their career or a part of their identity as musicians, as they teamed up with a flute maker to make a flute that was significant to them, or that picked certain things, like when I say things like a certain wood or a certain feel or a certain sound. And so I took that approach with someone that I had met at the inaugural World Flute Society's convention, which actually happened in Wisconsin in 2014.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And so I picked the image of a crane, and we only made 25, and they sold out before they were produced.
Wow. And
I picked the image of a crane because it is significant to the history and culture of the Ojibwe people, which is, who I was raised among. Mm-hmm. So I say that because I have another identity that I'm not as familiar with. And my mother is Tohono O'odham from a little town called Santa Rosa, Arizona, on the Tohono O'odham reservation in southern Arizona. But I was raised in northern Wisconsin. And so we have a clan system, and the Crane clan is actually, I use that as a means to talk about the clan system and to also talk more about what the Crane means to the Ojibwe people. And I myself am Bear Clan, so, you'd think, oh, well, you should do that. Well, I guess I could have, and there's always, time to revisit that as a possibility, but I chose the Crane as well as the instruments made out of cedar to share with people, to share with other enthusiasts about the instrument and about the culture with this instrument. So that was the main means behind that, to share that as an aspect with other people. And I still do that to this day.
Right on. Is there any future plans to continue that flute making, that signature flute?
Yeah, so I do have another plan in the mix, and the plan is I want to incorporate the woodpecker into the next instrument. I actually have the prototype, and the woodpecker is really significant to the people, as well as the history behind the instrument. And so I would use that as a means as well to tell the story behind the first flute, and also the message of the woodpecker. So the Ojibwe language, the word for woodpecker is pronounced papase. And to us, there's a story behind how the woodpecker lost its voice. And, I tell all these different things when I perform, and it's essentially to get people to think more about, like, for example, where their words come from, like even the word woodpecker, right? Like that. Europeans hadn't seen one like this before, and they had no words for it, so they described the bird based upon what it's doing. It's pecking on wood. But that's also what we do. So in the Ojibwe language and culture, the word papase refers to the popping noise that you hear, and it's the story. And we're always reminded by the story of how the woodpecker lost its voice. And it comes from the creation story a long, long time ago, when our trickster took on the form of a traveler and visited a really well-known woman who was known for her knowledge of the earth and medicines, and he tricked her into trying to get her to feed him. And while she was cooking things for him, he was, he was using his abilities to make those items of food grow or cook bigger than she had expected. And what she revealed is that she didn't want to share as much with a stranger. And as a result of that, he cast this, spell, if you will. That's a poor word, but of she will forever be voiceless and will always have to search for her food. And, and that gets people to think about, like, values. That gets people to think about, and I don't have time to talk about all that when I'm on stage. But, that is, if people want to, they can learn a little bit more. And surprisingly, as I've moved forward as a storyteller or as a musician, I've been hearing in the last couple of years that people actually enjoy the storytelling more than the flute playing. And I don't know if that's a compliment to my storytelling and not so much my flute playing, but then, nonetheless, it's interesting that, because I always had this this fear and this, because I'm influenced by the storytellers that came before me, like you mentioned in a previous conversation about Nick Hawkins. Like, he was an excellent storyteller.
Right.
He would be like one of the prototypes of the previous generation of who to look up to in regards to storytelling. And, to hear things like that, I just, I have to pay my respects to, those who came before me and the things that they were able to retain and share with the next generation.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, there are other plans to make another signature instrument and, to share the stories behind them, because if anything, anytime you see the instrument, you can remember the story behind it.
That's a good way to put it. Like you visually see it, you remember it, and that story then can continue on down the road for next generation and next generation, which, as you know, we have an obligation, right, for those future generations.
Yes. So part of the agreement with the flute maker was I wanted to personally communicate with everyone that had purchased the instrument so that I could tell them the story behind what influenced the instrument, as well as the story of the actual bird or the actual, item described in the flute. And so, we're connecting. I really appreciate it. It's, it was a really fun project.
That's cool. That's really cool. I like that. And we talked about that future and that obligation that we have here on earth, and I always tell people that we are so blessed as people living right now, and just like our ancestors were blessed at that time, we're blessed because we can honor, or should be honoring, that past and bringing those stories and all of those things, that our ancestors have passed down and had to deal with, and all of those things, and hold it within us, to remember them and remember what happened, but also to honor them in changing what the past is and bettering for the future. You know what I mean? And so, like, we have that obligation, but yet it's an honor to do that. Like, we should think of it as an honoring, like you were talking about, to live here, right now, to be able to pass those things on. So, hey man, let's take a quick break and let's get into one of your songs. This is off your new album. This is called The Woodpecker. You're listening to Indigenous Cafe. I'm your host, Roman Orona, traveling the world today of Indigenous music with the virtue of honor. You're practicing honor when you guide your life by your virtues, can be trusted to keep your promises. Avoid doing things that make you feel ashamed. Respect the rules you want to live by. Do what you believe is right no matter what. Set a good example for others. Let's continue our conversation right here on Indigenous Cafe with Darren Thompson. So Darren, you're an amazing flutist and you're also a writer and you write for many publications. Can you let the listening audience know what else you're doing?
Yes. So there's a couple of things I'm working on, like in regards to today as you and I are talking. I am in the research phase of writing my first book, which is a political history on my tribe of Lac du Flambeau. Mm. And a lot of people ask, like, well, what inspired you to write this book? And there's a couple of them. One of them is that I lost my father in 2018, and my direct link to my past through my father is gone forever. Mm. And so, that's sad, that's grim, but that's a fact. And if we do not start preserving and sharing our history, no one is going to do it. And second, there hasn't been a project out there that's been done like this from an Indigenous perspective, and more specifically, more from people from my community. Now, that's not to say anything about my community or those who haven't done it. I just believe that the time to do it is now. Right. And so that's what has inspired me. And it's a really long project. I have to go to National Archives, the Library of Congress, different museums and libraries throughout the Great Lakes area to research any and all references to the people of the Lac du Flambeau Band of Ojibwe people, dating back to about 1720. Wow. So it's a wild goose chase, but it's going to be worth it, and I've received a couple of grants to do that.
Great.
And I hope that others will also do this, because more importantly, what a lot of people don't realize, and if they don't, the more we talk about this, the more we hear about it, and the more we hear about it, the more conversing that is going on from our perspectives about who we are and where we come from. But more importantly, our peoples were not only the influencers of our local history and our cultural history, but world history. Mm. Things like highways, things like irrigation systems, things like rivers and lakes and town names and things like that are all influenced by our people, especially in this part of the world. And yeah. You said, you mentioned that you used to live for a time in Chicago. I always tell the story behind how the city of Chicago got its name from the Ojibwe people and their language. Mm. And, the word for Chicago is short for Chicagoning, which means the land of the skunks. So Chicag is our word for skunk, and Ganing is the place of. So Chicagoning it translates to mean the place of the skunks. But the funny thing about it is we're not the only people who gave this town that reference. Mm. So, for example, the Windy City got its name not because it was windy, but because of the way that it smelled. And so I think that's really interesting that this has been a reference. And there's many other towns throughout the Great Lakes and other places that have had names like this, but that's just, one of those examples.
Right. Right, but I think it's important because people don't understand it. And going back to what you said earlier, about people, that there's still literally people in the world that have not talked to a Native person or know about Native culture or anything else. And, and these references that you're talking about, like Chicago and, so many other places, within the U.S. and don't understand, that cultural significance to the people that were there, and you're starting to see this reviving of holding space when people are now, having a conference when we were able to have conferences together, right? But pulling people together and saying, hey, I'd like to acknowledge, that we are on the land of, such and such people, and let's give, acknowledgement to where we're at and who we literally, whose ground we are stepping on. You know what I mean? And it's important. It's important that people understand that and know that. That we're not a people of just the 1800s like Hollywood has played us out to be. We're a people that is way deeper than that, and knowing, holistically, that we as Native people and Indigenous people are all tied to everybody else and everything else on Mother Earth.
Yes, you brought up a really good point, and the overall theme of my performances, which is about an hour, is that, one, I'm telling a story, and the punchline of the story is that we are all related.
Right.
And I don't do that in I put a lot of thought into it, and there are many examples to this, and that knowledge comes from our ancestors. That is not a fad. That is not something that we aspire to. It is something that we learn through a lot of trial and error.
Right.
That is something that is direct knowledge that, I would like people to, take away. If there's one thing that you want to learn about us, it's that it took us a long time to get where we're at to this day. And we have a lot of knowledge about this part of the earth and overall the earth and our roles here, and that is to preserve and save what we have for those yet to come.
Yeah. Yes. I know that you're super busy, you're working on a lot of things. Can you tell the Indigenous Cafe listeners, where can we find you? Where can they support you? Where can they continue maybe to donate some funding or those types of things to help you continue your journey in writing a book or creating music and doing all of those things?
Sure. I manage my website, which is darrenthompson.net, and I have my music on every platform, digital platform that people listen to music. So that includes like Apple Music and Spotify and iHeartRadio, however people listen to it, Pandora. All you have to do is search my name, Darren Thompson, and that would be the most direct or most efficient way. Take a listen, on YouTube or Spotify or Apple. You have to get about 300 plays to get about $1. So, it's not like I'm going to get $1 for every unless I market in Thailand or China or Japan.
Interesting to know. As a fellow musician, interesting to know. Okay.
Yeah.
I thank you for the time. Indigenous Cafe, please go out, get his music, listen to his music, and be a supporter, and help in continuing Darren's journey, not only as a musician, but as an author. Help him out. Darren, thanks for being here on Indigenous Cafe, man. You're welcome anytime. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our listening audience with?
Awesome. No, just thank you for tuning in, and I wish you the best of luck, and I really appreciate what you're doing, Roman.
Thank you very much, man. We'll be back here on Indigenous Cafe.
Au fait, j'ai voulu te téléphoner pour te demander allô, quelque chose quoi, yeah. Quelque chose quoi, yeah. Oui, mais moi j'en ai assez. Elles ne font que m'appeler. Oui, mais moi je vais me fâcher. Il est bangala, sauve-moi de là. J'ai voulu te téléphoner pour te demander allô, quelque chose quoi, yeah. Quelque chose quoi, yeah.
Comment tu me dis quelque chose à 6h du matin alors?
Oui, la sonneuse est repartie, marche de mon appétit. Oui, même papa de mon lit. Il est bangala, sauve-moi de là. Allô, en fait j'ai voulu te téléphoner pour te demander allô, quelque chose quoi, yeah.
Qu'est-ce que tu veux alors?
Quelque chose quoi, yeah.
Pues ton drink là, il a quelque chose derrière. Qu'est-ce que tu veux derrière?
Et ça, 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 et encore téléphone.
Vale, yes.
Allô, 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 et ça, et ça, et ça, et ça, et ça, et ça, et ça,
Mais comment est-ce que...
allô, 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 et en fait j'ai voulu te téléphoner pour te demander allô, quelque chose quoi, yeah.
J'ai trouvé.
Dis-moi même,
Oui.
quelque chose quoi, yeah. Le pire c'est quand on ne m'appelle plus. Oh là que je suis déçue. Non, mais moi je n'en peux plus. Personne n'a le téléphone, moi. Allô?
Coupé.
Hein? Bon bah laissez couper, hein. Laissez couper ça. Yubeco, 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 Tilly bangala yo, Tilly bangala yo, Tilly bangala Tilly bangala Tilly bangala yo, Tilly bangala yo, Tilly bangala Tilly bangala En fait j'ai voulu te téléphoner pour te demander allô, quelque chose quoi, yeah. Quelque chose quoi, yeah. Oui mais je n'ai pas pu te téléphoner pour te demander allô, quelque chose quoi, yeah. Quelque chose quoi, yeah.
You're listening to Indigenous Cafe, your Indigenous Cafe. And as we travel the world today, we are traveling with the virtue of honor. Let's continue our journey here on Indigenous Cafe. Thank you for traveling the world with me today here on Indigenous Cafe. A special thank you to Darren Thompson for making time. Please go out and look him up and get his music. Again, here on Indigenous Cafe, I always leave you with something, and here's an affirmation. I am honorable. I keep my agreements and treat others with respect. I care about doing the right thing. Have a great day. Wherever you're at, stay safe, be well. My love and blessings to you all. Until our next journey here on Indigenous Cafe, take care for now.
They don't know you like I do. No, no. They don't see what you're going through. Oh, what you gotta do. Oh, just to get by. Well, they don't know you like I do. See where you're going to. While my little man's shoes, yeah, just to see how he survives. But I know, yes, I know you're strong and beautiful, yeah. You are soldiers on the front line. To bear well. No, sometimes the weight gets you heavy. But turn me on and I'll be there. 'Cause I know, yes, I know you're strong and beautiful, yeah. You're soldiers on the front line. Yeah, you are, and I know you've been out there all by yourself. Well, you won't have to go to law.